Hey everybody, welcome back to another film of the week. Hope you guys been enjoying the content on the channel as of late. Just keeping up some content here and there. Excuse me if things are just kind of maybe be on pause for a second, or just kind of family wise, just kind of fighting through a little bit of a sickness. So hopefully we get through this, soon. I'm just trying to avoid also getting sick. So we'll see in the next coming days. Hopefully everything will be back to normal. But we're back with another film of the week, and I was wanting to do a certain film, and unfortunately, I just did not get some time to watch it, just because again we've been dealing with some stuff around the house. So hopefully, because there's one film especially that I really want to see, and I've been like delaying it for like almost a year up to this point. So trust me, I am desperate to watch a certain movie, and hopefully I'll get around to watching it soon. But just as another backup of sorts, and I guess as some form of relevancy, given what this year is going to be for superhero genre, I figured to discuss something of a DC film, as we are approaching another reboot for the DC universe in the form of the upcoming Superman film being directed by James Gunn, which I don't really have much interest in. I figured to revisit the old DC universe, the DC EU, as it was once called, and talk about the beginnings there and my overall feelings about that particular Superman that they had done. That film, of course, that we're going to be talking about today is Man of Steel, which was directed by Zack Snyder, released in 2013, and this stars Henry Cavill as the title character. Produced by Christopher Nolan, and I forget who wrote it, but yeah, starring Henry Cavill in the lead role, Amy Adams as Lois Lane, Lawrence Fishburne as the boss at the journalism place that Superman works at, and Michael Shannon, who plays the main villain. But as story goes, it is a origin story of the Superman character, as he is. So the film begins with a big action sequence that takes place on his home planet of Krypton. His father, played by Russell Crowe, helps him escape from the clutches of Michael Shannon's character, and his home planet of Krypton, as well as his father and his mother, they all cease to exist because there's a big war that was going on between different sides of this race, that being Kryptonians, and eventually, who we would become Clark Kent lands on Earth, and he is brought on to a family, the Kent family, a farm, family and such. And the Kents adopt him and they raise him up. And the film shows from the present to the past, not the other way around, not in chronological order, but just splicing it from the present to the past, of how Clark Kent is the way he is, and ultimately how he discovers his origins, and as a looming threat arrives on Earth, takes on a certain responsibility that he sees that he needs to do, and ultimately becoming that of the Superman, as we all know and love. So just to set the stage correctly, I'm not familiar with a lot of the Supermen. I'm familiar with a few of them, Christopher Reeves, most notably, but I'm not familiar with a lot of the other ones. I'm not familiar with, I believe there was Brandon Routh, Superman, from Superman Returns. But, when I say that I'm familiar by name, but I'm not familiar by overall, just perspective. I'm not familiar with them, never seen those movies. But this was my second Superman that I'm familiar with. Like I said, the first being Christopher Reeves, this one being Henry Cavill. And as far as Superman go, I mean, aesthetically speaking, he is definitely the part. To me, it definitely looks like the character. But acting wise, I mean, there's more left. There's more to be desired, and because Henry Cavill is always is a performer that is very, as Superman is, very stoic, but not much in substance in terms of his overall just groundedness. There isn't a lot to the dimensions of the character, and a lot can be said also with the direction that comes with Man of Steel, and the ultimately with the director himself, that being Zack Snyder. There's some people who would probably equate him to a person like Michael Bay, and that a comparison is not far off. They both have aesthetic, but they don't have substance. In the case of Zack Snyder, there's a little more weight to his aesthetic because he is trying to at least find substance. With Michael Bay, it's just like pornographic type sensibilities. But at least with here, there's a glimmer of artistry. There is a person who is trying to present something through these gargantuan type visuals. Problem is that the overall substance laid out is not as heft. And it's clearly, in the case of Man of Steel, it clearly takes a page from that of Nolan, or at least by overall mood and overall demeanor, but it doesn't understand the weight of Nolan. It doesn't understand the ambitions of Nolan. It just understands how to technically flirt in that overall feeling that of what a Nolan film is. But it's also weirdly two separate beasts, because on one hand you have a film that is trying to be that of a study of the Man of Steel, as the film is titled, and then the other half of it is a giant just visual splatter of just big action sequences and a really awkward camera, just like the weird zoom effects that this films like Star Trek would use, the modern Star Trek movies. It has not a flow of energy that is consistent, and there are pieces of it that are not as that are okay. Like they're not bad, but there's a large part of it also that is just loud and just doesn't have much of anything really to say. And like even the more I talk about it, the less I find interested to discuss, because it just doesn't hold a lot for me. And just with Snyder, generally with his sensibilities, it just doesn't have much to offer outside of a fairly interesting frame. I mean, I can acknowledge that the look of Man of Steel is interesting. Like I said, I think that their Superman, just by overall look, is probably superior, and it has a lot more of a stoic and a lot more cleaner edge than a lot of the other ones that I'm familiar with. But by overall substance, by overall characteristic, by overall just interest, and that goes both in story and in performance, I just don't get a lot. And I just think that it's very without substance. And in that, I just feel rather bored. I feel really disconnected. And a lot of the disjointed nature of its structure also appears pretty blatant, at least for me anyway. So as a film goes, I just don't see much there. There isn't really much for me outside of, again, what it might be doing aesthetically. What it's doing in overall heft and overall emotion and overall just literal and how the narrative represents itself, it just doesn't come across as genuine. It just feels rather disjointed. It feels a bit half-baked, and it just doesn't bear a lot to chew on. And that goes for everywhere. Performances, for the writing, for the direction. It just feels very, very lackluster. And I just don't get a whole lot when seeing what I'm seeing, and that goes for a lot of what Snyder's done in the DC universe as well. When that happened with Batman vs Superman, that happened in the Justice League film. Yes, his cut, that 3-hour monstrosity or 4-hour monstrosity, however long it was. Yes, that was just, yeah. Like, the problem with Snyder is always been as a storyteller in terms of a visual artist. I mean, he has marks, but when it comes to actually telling a story, it doesn't matter if it's 3 hours and it doesn't matter if it's an hour and a half. There's always a fundamental problem. And I just think that it is to really do with care, to really do with to digging. And I just think that he doesn't have that kind of attitude as a storyteller. I think he's more interested in painting, but not necessarily crafting, if that makes sense. He's more interested in doing the strokes, but he's not interested in what those strokes mean and what ultimately the flow of it and what could it form into. So as it stands, I just don't really care, and I just don't think that there's much to the dissection of the character and overall just feeling. I just feel like there's not much there. It just feels like something that I could really forget about, and honestly have probably I've forgotten about upon watching it. So yeah, it didn't really do much for me, and a lot of it is attributed to what Snyder is doing behind the camera and his overall just choices as a filmmaker. Like I said, visual artist, sure. Storyteller, not so much. So yeah, so there's my thoughts on Man of Steel. I don't really care for it. Doesn't really do much for me. I don't hate it. I don't think it's terrible, but I definitely don't think that there's much of anything there that's desirable outside of what it's doing aesthetically. But you guys know your thoughts on Man of Steel if you guys have seen it, and your thoughts on the DC universe, the old DC universe, the DCEU, and your your feelings on the new DC universe that's about to be starting up, and just generally what DC, your thoughts there, and of course with Zack Snyder as a filmmaker. I mean, he's done other films outside of DC, obviously, like 300, Watchmen, most recently films like Army of the Dead, which I really didn't care for. But if you guys are a fan of Snyder's, I personally am really not, but if you're a fan of Snyder's, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below in terms of his filmography, your favorite films of his, and your least favorite films. Let me know all your thoughts in the comment section below. And that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. And until then, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye.